All right. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning if you're on West Coast time. My name is Russell Scabetti. I'm the Vice President of Product Strategy here at Core Software. I'm happy to just do a quick introduction here for today's webinar where Chris Zeppenfeld, a Senior Director of Business Intelligence for the Charlotte Hornets, is going to take us through his presentation on the evolution of lead scoring. This is a presentation that Chris did as part of the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference recently, and everyone thought he did a phenomenal job. We asked him if he could run it back for those of you that maybe weren't able to attend the conference, and Chris was nice enough to oblige. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and use the question section of the GoToWebinar screen. I will keep track of those, and at the end we will make sure we try to get to as many of your questions as possible. And we're also going to be recording this, so if you have to bounce off the line or if you want to share this with someone afterwards, you are more than welcome to share the recording. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Chris Zeppenfeld. Chris, the floor is yours.
All right, everybody. Let's dig in here. Let's find out a little bit more about, what today's presentation is going to be more about is giving everyone kind of an idea on where they might fit in terms of their evolution of lead scoring. And I think what we've laid out here is a roadmap to help people kind of see where to start, where kind of the middle and where the most advanced teams are at. So where I want to start is this. Our power rankings, and I'm sure everybody's seen these, and pay attention to these each week, and they're a great source of data for one thing for us, and that's it's a pretty actually good consistent measure of team performance week to week. While they're kind of subjective in nature, they're really, we've seen these since 2003, so it's a pretty good idea of kind of like how our team has played. And so what I did is I actually went to ESPN.com and took a look at our graph for every year of the Charlotte Hornets existence / Bobcats, and took a look to see how we've been each year. And here is what our performance looks like. And that little yellow line there, I remind you there are 30 teams in the NBA, so if you're 15th, you're right in the middle. You can see our performance has not been that great on the court over the last 12 years. And just in case we have any millennials that are on this webinar here today, I have a graph that even makes this simpler. If you're up at the top, you're a good team. If you're in the middle, you're kind of meh. And if you're at the bottom, you're kind of, well, crap. So we've been kind of somewhere between meh and crap for about 12 years. But you can see here towards, the last like 5-6 years that I've been here, these are where our ESPN power rankings have ended up at the end of the season. So we've had some pretty tough years during my time here. But if we compare that to our new full season ticket rankings across the NBA, our sales team is consistently, punched above its weight year after year after year. And we're pretty proud of the fact that right now, I believe we're number 2 in the NBA right now in new ticket sales. So we're pretty pumped about that. It's something that we're really proud of here on the sales team. And a lot of people ask us just, how did we do it? And I think the answer comes down to 3 things. I think it's a combination of having good ticket pricing. Obviously if the pricing is too high, no one can sell it, no matter how good they are. I have to give a lot of credit to our sales managers as well. I think they do a great job training our reps and convincing people over the phone to buy these tickets. But what we're going to talk today about is the third pillar, which is lead scoring. So let's talk about how your lead scoring might stack up. And we're going to start right at the beginning. So we're going to talk about ticketing behaviors. We're then going to get into some demographics. We're going to talk about something called recency behaviors. We're going to learn from our past. There's some next level behaviors, and then picking the right rep. We're going to go through all of these today, and you can kind of see where you line up. So let's start the very first thing that probably everybody in sports is at, and that's making sure your ticketing data is in your CRM. So we get our ticketing data. We have Ticketmaster Artix. We get that nightly, and some people can get that in an hourly basis or in real time. Here's a screenshot of what that looks like for us. You can see this particular person is in our CRM, and then we can easily see, what seats do they have, what did they pay for it, what game did they go to, and so forth. And this is the bare minimum that everybody should be at in sports. And so let's take a look at this, kind of, think of it in your rep's eyes. This is pretty much what you know about this lead if you have your Arctics data coming into your CRM. You know their name, you know their address, you know their phone and email, and you know what tickets that they bought. They went to a certain concert or a certain show or a certain game, you know where they sat and how much they paid. And that's pretty much all that you do know. But what we're going to go over for the rest of the presentation today is really showcasing you can know a whole heck of a lot more than this. So the first thing that we did when we saw this was, we realized that Arctics data can be pretty complicated, especially for you guys who have maybe worked in CRM and in Arctics. You know that it can be very challenging sometimes to just pull very simple things like, who are my pick 11s from 2 years ago, or who are our half-season buyers from 5 years ago. So what we did is we created a field on our contact entity called sold product, which is basically a buyer bucket. And it basically says just, what are you? And what you can see here in our results in CRM here is a field that lives literally right next to the person's name whenever you search a contact in our CRM. So it helps our reps very easily know, oh, this guy's a single game buyer, or this guy was a current pick 23. And they don't have to go looking through mounds and mounds of Arctics ticketing data to be able to figure out that answer. And that data not only lives right next to the contact search results, but we also put it in the contact itself in a year-by-year basis. So that way that the reps can see kind of that year-to-year progression of the buyer. And you can see in this example we've got a guy who started out as a pick 5 buyer, then he became a pick 11, a pick 20, and then finally a full season this year. And we'll continue to do so next year during the 16-17 season. The next thing that we did after we have these buyer buckets in is we went and got demographic info. So we wanted to know a little bit more about just actually who is this person. And using our friends at Axiom, we collect the demographic info on each contact, and we make sure that it's visible for the reps. So you can see we've added a few fields that are right in front of the contact dashboard that they see on a particular person. We get quite a bit of demographics from Axiom. We kind of pick and chose, which 5 to 6 we thought would make the most impact for the reps. That's kind of a personal choice what you decide to put up there. But these are the ones that we chose. Now, when we do this, there's probably over 200 pieces of data that you actually get from Axiom, potentially on a particular contact, and that can be a little bit of data overload for the reps. But when you kind of put all these things together between demographics and their personal purchases, their income level, and their residence, you have a pretty good idea of who this person is when you add all those things up. And that's where something called personas clusters come in. So it comes a part of the Axiom package that you get. And if you're not familiar with personas clusters, you may have heard of them called Prism. It's a competing platform that does this. But basically what these personas clusters are like little cutesy stereotypes for all of that demographic info you just gathered. So it goes and takes all that demographic info and puts them in a kind of a nice, neat little cluster name that's easy to remember, like Summit Estates or Good Neighbors or, Climbing the Ladder. They have kind of cutesy little names, and we put those names directly in the search results next to the name for each person in CRM. Now, what we've done is, because I said there's a lot of demographic info, and that can sometimes be overload for the reps, what we did is we kind of just focused their training on, hey, recognizing certain cluster names and then encouraging them to tailor their pitch based off that cluster. So we didn't try to overload them with too much data, but we wanted to let them know, hey, there's certain clusters here that are pretty good, and these are the types of people that you'd be assuming that you would get on the phone with that cluster. So once we added the clusters in, the next piece for us was we really wanted to find out like which clusters do we do really well at. And these were the season ticket holder counts. So we took every season ticket holder that we had, and we ran them through Axiom, and these are the clusters that came back. And you can see for us there's a very clear number 1. It's called Summit Estates. Our number 2 is Established Elite, which is kind of a pretty far ahead in that second place, and then there's kind of a 3 through 10 there is all kind of together, and then it kind of tapers off from there. So out of the 70 clusters, we right away kind of realized that our season ticket holders really look like only a few of these clusters. And we thought it was really important, to take a look at these clusters and monitor them, because it was kind of the very beginnings of our lead scoring efforts. Quite literally, our first lead scoring campaign was, we're just going to go after a bunch of sum of the states. So one of the things that we did once we saw this research is we went ahead and we tried to grab every sum of the states that we could in Charlotte, knowing that this is very clearly our #1 cluster. So let's go try to see if we can find more of them. What we did on the analytics end, though, is we wanted to find out, well, how does this compare to the rest of the Charlotte demographic area? Is there a lot of sum of the states here, or do we have a higher concentration of sum of the states compared to the rest of the DMA area? And this research ended up being something that our sponsorship team actually found a lot of uses for, is when we index them. So we index them against the Charlotte demographic area, and you can see we have probably 10 to 12 clusters that over-index. Those are all the ones in green, including our #1 cluster, which is sum of the states, which over-indexes almost 17 times the normal Charlotte demographic area. So how to interpret that was, if you were to just put a billboard in the middle of Charlotte just randomly versus putting that same billboard in the middle of our arena, you'd run into 17 times the sum of the states people inside of the Charlotte arena than you would in them just randomly in the middle of Charlotte. And that's a really key piece of information for our sponsorship team to roll out, but also for our ticketing folks. It really let us figure out which leads were the good ones, which leads were kind of the meh, and which ones we were just going to ignore. So our very first kind of true, quote-unquote top scored leads campaign really focused on all these ones here that are in green. From there, we take a look and we kind of made a heat map of kind of, how do we compare to these different clusters. So this is, probably the world's most complicated graph here. Has income levels and ages, and the different cluster names are kind of plotted all out here. Again, we've kind of simplified this for everybody, and these are the types of leads that we focus on. So we focus on 3 types of areas of leads based off of that analytics that we did. We do very well in kind of the middle income, 25 to 30-year-olds. We do really well in the kind of 35 to 45 upper middle income, and then the 45 to 55 highest income levels. Those are kind of our 3 sweet spots. And then you can kind of see towards the far end, those are the areas that we don't do very well in. And this isn't really surprising for us. I think this graph would look a lot different if you were a team that has 60 years of history and has 40 to 50 year-old season ticket holders who have been through generations with the team. We're a 15-year-old team. There isn't going to be this long-withstanding legacy of season ticket holders to go after. So we don't focus on that group, and we really focus on the areas that we're strong in. So once we kind of went through these Personas clusters, we thought, well, we've got this good demographic info and info on Personas clusters that's been helpful. Can we combine that with the ticketing behavior that we see and come up with some sort of a number? And that's where Turnkey Intelligence really came in and helped us out with their product called Prospector. And what they do is exactly that. They take the personal demographics from Axiom, they take the past ticketing behavior from Ticketmaster, they combine that information together, and in their algorithms, they're able to help us determine a good lead from a bad lead. So at the Hornets, we actually have 3 different types of scoring systems for all of our leads. With Turnkey, we have one for the Hornets. The first one is a priority score, which basically says how likely are you to buy. And then a second score, which is a capacity score, meaning if you buy, how much will you spend? So if we were to go score our lead in a database, you might see something like 4-star for priority, 2-star for capacity. Since we're also Hornet Sports and Entertainment, we use that same thought process, and we applied that to all of our arena buyers as well. So we have quite a bit of arena shows that we're helping to sell, and our arena marketing team really liked what we were doing on the Hornet side and saw the success we were having selling on the Hornets using lead scoring. So we did that same thing for 11 genres of music. And we have shows that fit these 11 genres quite frequently. So now we're able to go in and not only get scores for Hornets, but also get a score for their likelihood to buy an arena show. Being a part of the NBA, the league itself actually has created their own scoring system that we use simultaneously with the 2 from Turnkey. and theirs is a likelihood to purchase. Theirs goes on a slightly different scoring system. They have a few factors in their model that I don't have access to, that only the league has access to. For example, who might have access to NBA's League Pass on TV? That's something I won't have access to, but the league does, and that's helpful in determining, how likely someone is to purchase. So when we're looking at all of these lead scores, this is kind of what you would see on a contact. So here is one of our contacts in CRM, and you can see we have the NBA score there, we have the 2 Hornets scores from Turnkey, we have their personas cluster there, and then we have also the arena genre scoring as well, all kind of laid out together. So in this example here, we might market a Foo Fighters show to this contact because he has a 5-star in rock, but we might not market to him for an Usher show because he's a 1 for urban. This is the screen that what our CRM manager, who is our main lead assigner, she would go in here, and this is kind of the screen that she would look at. And I always say it's a little bit of an art and a science to assigning leads. The science certainly, of course, is what the scores are. What are the numbers that you see there? But there's a little bit of an art to it as well. So you can see in this example here on David Castellucci, he is buyer bucket is single game buyer. And his FICO score is good at 800, but his priority score is a 3, which is kind of in the middle. And so our lead assignment, our lead assigner, kind of goes in and she can play with the filters and mess a little bit with the kind of the searches to see, well, do I want to do top score leads this way, or do I want to do it a different way? It's kind of up to you guys, I think, as the teams and the managers themselves, on whether or not you want to reveal these scores. So I know this question will come up. I get asked this every time I do this presentation is, should we show these scores to the reps? One of the, I'll kind of give you the pros and cons of it. Here at the Hornets, we have chosen not to show that to the reps. I think the concern there is that if the reps knew that they had a 1-star lead, that they won't put as much effort into trying to sell that lead as they can. And I think that it's a fair point because it's not as if the 1-stars don't close at all for us. In volume, we certainly close a number of 1-stars, but when you look at it in terms of a ratio, they don't close quite as well. So we've kind of erred on that side, but the other side of the coin is that you probably do want to have your reps, know that, hey, this is a 5-star lead. We want you to put maximum effort on this. Don't just give up. Don't let this just, kind of be like any other lead. So the happy medium that we've chosen here is we won't reveal the scores to them, but we might tell them when we assign the lead out, you'll see a little message from our CRM manager that'll tell the reps, hey, this is a top scored lead. It just lets the reps know, kind of nudges them a little bit to say like, hey, this guy must score really well. There's a really good reason that we're giving this lead to you. Don't just give it, give it a little bit more effort than when you normally do. So these are our scores from the 15-16 season. We've had over 200,000 opportunities, and it works really well. These opportunities to help us get a really good gauge of whether or not these lead scoring systems work. And I think that's a piece that oftentimes gets overlooked. There's a lot of lead scoring systems out there from a lot of different companies, but a lot of times the teams, they don't take it upon themselves to actually monitor to make sure these things are working. So what we saw with our lead scoring systems, in Prospector, you can see there's kind of a jump step at that 5-star level, and then there's one in the NBA scoring at the 800 level. So what we consider to be kind of a quote-unquote top score lead, and a lot of times our searches in CRM will be something like, give me any contact who's either a 5-star lead or above an 800. And sometimes they could be both, that contact could have scores that are both in that jump step. Sometimes they might not be. But it allows us to really, I think, do a good sweep of finding out like which ones are the ones that are really, quote unquote, really good top scored leads. The next group that I'm going to kind of go over is something that I would call recency behaviors. And what these are all things that would cause you to vault them forward in your lead assignment queue. So you may not score well, like this person here below, but because he opens or clicks an email or does some other recency behavior, you might vault him up in the lead scoring queue. So let's take a look at this one here. we've kind of taken a snapshot of these are potential leads we may or may not give to the reps, and you can see the guy in the bottom there. He had a partial plan with us 2 seasons ago, and he only scored a 300 in the NBA FICO score, and the prospector scores a 2. So neither one of those are very good scores, but he clicked on an email about our open house email, which is basically a sales email for the Hornets. And because he clicked on that email, we might vote him up anyway, even though his score is low. So we've now combined this lead score concept now with a recency behavior. For us here at the Hornets, emails account for 17% of all of the revenue generated for new fulls and partials last year. And the way that we define that is that if we sent you an email and then you either opened or clicked that email, if you bought 21 days within that opening or clicking, then we consider that to be a yes in this graph. So we've had Exact Target for 8 years. We now have Marketo starting this year. And you can see it's been a pretty big chunk of our success. So anytime anybody's opening or clicking, we're looking at that, every single day when we're assigning things out and being strategic on, all right, if you've clicked an email and your score is a certain way, we're probably going to push that out to a rep to have you guys take a phone call. The next one here is survey behavior. We use Turnkey's Intelligence Surveyor platform. Many teams, I think, do this. There's plenty of surveys that a lot of teams send out. One thing that I wanted to kind of highlight here, though, with these surveys is to make sure that we're only collecting the most actionable responses for each contact. To give you an example, in the NBA, we have a survey that the league actually sends out for us that has like 75 questions on it. We could put all 75 questions into CRM, and it would probably be brain overload to all of our reps. So what we do, and we make it a point here at the Hornets, is to only take like the 2 or 3 most actionable items out of that survey, and then we put them literally as notes in their CRM so that they can see those while they're going through the rest of their conversations with them. So in this case here for the season ticket holder survey, we wanted to ask them, how likely are you to renew? What could the organization do to, make you feel better? And, what's one benefit that might change your perceptions? And these were their answers. So this is a nice kind of, snapshot of, I think, what the best nuggets of info were from that survey. And our reps just go ahead and see that in CRM, and they can act on it accordingly. Next one is retail behavior. So we have 2 stores. We have, of course, our online store, which we use through Fanatics. So if you go to hornetsfanshop.com and you buy something online, that's one data feed. The second store is, of course, our in-house team store, and we use Retail Pro for that. So whether you buy something online or you come to the arena and you buy something in our stores, we want to be able to get that data and match that up with a contact in CRM. Our theory on this is, if you purchased a jersey or a hoodie or something from us, it's probably a good indicator of fandom. So what we were able to do is get those data feeds, into our data warehouse, ingest them, in our environment, and then go ahead and import them into our contacts and CRM so our reps can see, oh, this guy's just spent $35 at the team store yesterday. In some cases, depending upon, again, how they lead score and maybe some of their other behaviors, we'll combine that to see if that person would be worthy of a sales call by spending maybe a certain threshold at the team store. So a good example there would be if somebody bought a Kemba Walker jersey and we've never seen them before, and then they go in the store next month and they buy some shoes, and then they go in and buy some hats. Like, this guy's probably a fan of the Hornets, but we've never talked to him about a ticketing sales message. Perhaps it's time to engage that person from a ticket sales standpoint, and we'll assign that out as a lead. The last one here is for our recency behaviors is web visits. So we use actually 2 companies to help with this. One is Marketo, and the other one is Fizzle. And using those 2, we're able to take these anonymous web visits that we get to Hornets.com and then match them against our database to identify a user. So if you were to go to Hornets.com, a web visit is created in those systems, and then we try to match that up using our data warehouse to see if we know who that person is. So we don't match up everybody. It's not like every single person who comes to the Hornets, we're able to match them up to someone in CRM. But for the ones that we can match, for every 50 people we identify, we're able to close one of them over the phone. And so we've been able to capture, a good, 8 to 10 sales per month that we normally would not have had, which has added up to about a good $10,000 to $15,000 a month in new sales revenue. And that's just simply because we were able to identify, hey, this person clicked on the ticketing link, or he was, browsing on the roster page, or wherever he was on Hornets.com. It really has been a nice little lead source that we can kind of pump in to the reps every day. The other thing where I think this helps is that it allows the reps to be able to see what they're doing together. One of the things that we do is we created something called an interesting moment in CRM. It's actually an entity. It is actually called Interesting Moments. And what it does is it combines all these recency behaviors into one. So whether you click on a link, which is coming from Marketo, or you visit our webpage, which comes from Fizzle, or you fill out a survey in Turnkey, whatever you do, we combine those all into one entity so that when a rep goes in to see a contact, they can see all of those interesting moments in one spot. And another good example of where we've used this, and I think the reps really like this feature, is something that we've called My Active Interesting Moments. Our interesting moments here, this is a little query that we ran that is all of the reps' leads that they own. So in this example, Kevin York is our rep. These are just the leads that he has checked out. He doesn't get to see any other leads. But here, he can go visit here at any point and see any of the leads that he's working with. Did any of them open an email recently? Did any of them visit our website recently? And there's a really good example here with Rodney Thomas, who's about the 4th person down on this list. Kevin last contacted him on January 21st and probably wasn't going to call him until late March. But he went on to My Active Interesting Moments, looked at it and noticed, hey, Rodney went in and he was visiting our season memberships page. Well, that's interesting because I remember he had a pick 6 last year and he was kind of playing around the memberships area on our website. Maybe I should give him a strategic call and see if he has any questions about maybe getting him upgraded to fulls. So this is a great example, I think, where the reps really can be actively engaged with your CRM by virtue of the efforts that your CRM and analytics teams are doing here by combining that data for them. So we're halfway here. And I think right here what you're kind of seeing is probably where a lot of teams actually are in sports. There's a lot of teams doing these things in ticketing behavior and demographics and recency behaviors. But the stuff that we're going to go through in the rest of this presentation here is stuff that I think is pretty new and cutting edge. So let's take a look at how we can learn from our past. And to learn from our past, I'm going to draw inspiration from my favorite actor of all time, Patrick Stewart. And so I thought this was an appropriate picture here because we're going to talk about the ghosts of CRM past. And there's 3 ways the ghosts of CRM past can help you. One of them is something that we call last prior objection. The second is something called last contacted on. And the third one is activities in range. So let's take a look at the first one here. And when we were, watching the reps make a bunch of calls, something that we kind of realized is that, we sometimes we're spinning our wheels. And what I mean by that is like a rep would make a call and they would say, no, I'm not going to buy Hornet season tickets from you. And our reps would be like, well, why not? And they would say something like, well, I can get free tickets anytime. So, the attempt, the rep is kind of done, they mark it as lost, they kind of move on. Well, what I said was, well, the second time we tried them, maybe we tried them in a few months, like we should learn from that. We should be a little bit better on our next attempt, learning what would happen on attempt 1. And furthermore, I wanted to know that if we encountered certain objections, do we ever actually get past them at a later date? So our analytics team had examined all of our opportunities from the 15-16 season and looked to see, did we ever have in attempt 2 a win when we encountered this objection in attempt 1? So you can see on here, these are the objections that we had, and some of these are surprising and some of these aren't. You can see at the bottom there, I thought one that was a little interesting to me is that the objection was negative perception about the NBA. We've never actually overcame that last year in all the sales calls that we ever did on the second attempt, versus some of these other ones where we did have some success. For example, you can see spouse won't let them buy tickets. We actually did a pretty good job of overcoming that the next attempt that we made at them. So I think it really helped us kind of get a gauge on, when to cut the cord with certain leads, or which leads might be better to put back in the queue for later. And here's a good example of kind of how this can kind of play together with some other areas of your CRM. Let's talk about the concept of last contacted on, which I think every CRM has this field somewhere. And here's how it would play out. So here are two leads. We've got Kelly and Tara, and they basically look the same. They're both single-name buyers. The last time we talked to them, they said that they were using the secondary market instead. They're both a 3-star lead. They're both a 500 on the NBA score, and they live just about the same distance away from the arena. So when we're trying to decide between these two leads, the next thing we might want to look at is, well, when was the last time we called them? And it just so happened that the last time we called them was exactly, again, the same date, February 8th. However, there's something very, very different about these two leads. And for a long time, we really saw these leads as the same. Well, one of the things that we wanted to think about was, well, I know when the last time I contacted her was February 8th, but how many times have we called her since the beginning of the season? And that's an entirely different question. And when we did that, we had to really think about frequency, and that's the key word here. When we did the frequency, we wanted to go back and we looked and we saw two very different pictures. Kelly had only 2 calls between her time from the beginning of the season and now, versus poor Tara that we've called 11 times. There's a big difference between Kelly and Tara here. Now, in the beginning of the season, I said we've kind of actually outperformed our expectations on the court. So we've only called her twice in that time period. She may not be necessarily aware that the team is doing as well as it is, and tickets, are not so easy to come by. So there's, perhaps a greater, or I'd say a better reason to maybe give her a call versus Tara, who we've called 11 times throughout the season. So at that point, I think Tara's probably done in terms of her, whether she should be assigned versus Kelly. We created this field called activities in range to house this data. So you can see that number there is right in the middle of that search. You can see here that, the Tara Smith there has the 11 versus the Kelly who has 3. So we're able to run a filtered search on something like, I don't want to give, I want to do all the single-name buyers who have at least a 3-star scoring, but I don't want to give anybody out that maybe we've called more than twice in the last 120 days. You can see that information here also lives on the contact record itself here with all the other lead scores. So again, it's all nice and neat in one spot for our lead assigner to be able to see that. All right, so the next part here that we want to look at is something that we got from watching online poker. So I was watching poker and I thought to myself, should he play or fold this hand? And there's something missing on this picture. And the thing that's missing on this picture is that little percentage right there in the box that you see when you're watching it on TV. And what this poker player is trying to do is literally calculate that in his head. And once he calculates that in his head, it kind of tells him how he's going to strategically make his bets. Well, when we saw this, we kind of thought of this as, well, this is pretty much kind of what our reps do about in terms of like how much effort are they going to give to this lead? Are they going to continue to try to call this guy? But when we looked at it, we thought, well, we don't really need to keep this percentage from them. We could actually give it to them. So what we did is we looked at, well, how can we give them a win expectancy? And to do that, we really focused our time on our stages. So pretty much everybody in CRM that does opportunities has some sort of stage concept, which basically says, like, how far along are you in the sale, or what yard line are you on, basically. So these are our stages here. And what I wanted to first find out was, what's our win percentage when we hit a certain stage? So if we can just have a first conversation with you, we could be talking about the weather or who knows what that conversation is. We at least close you 4% of the time. If we're having an actual sales pitch conversation, we can close you 13% of the time. And if we have an appointment with you, we can close you at 23% of the time. None of those percentages to me was particularly eye-opening to me. I just thought that's probably what it really is. But what I was kind of wanting to dig in is our reps tend to have a lot of sales pitch conversations. How do they prioritize those ones? What if you have 500 leads that are all at this stage? Then what do you do? And so what we did is we ran a regression to determine which factors were most significant in predicting wins in future opportunities. And that include things like just how many phone calls did I make in that opportunity? How many phone calls were at each stage? What past objections did I run into previously? How did that slider bar movement go? Did you go from this stage to that stage? How long did it take to get there? And when we ran that regression, we were able to figure out the most significant factors, and that would help us come up with an actual number as to how likely are we to close this sale based off what we know. And so in what our beta version right now is literally what you see on the screen here. We're trying to put that number literally on their phone call screen to let the reps know, hey, you have a 5% chance to close this lead. Haven't rolled it out to the reps yet, but like I said, it's in beta version right now, and we're still making some tweaks to it. So here's an example of how this would play out. Let's pretend that we had a meet and greet with Kemba Walker, and you only had, you can only take one of them, and you had 4 prospects. So let's pretend that we have kind of a blue, an orange, a red, and a green guy. And these are our 4 prospects, and these are the stats that we know about those opportunities. And this is designed to be difficult. This should be a hard decision to make because some of these look better than others if you look at certain criteria, but then they don't look as good if you look at some other criteria. And so when we run the numbers on here, this is what our model actually came up with. So for those of you who picked orange, congratulations. But you can see how this would be difficult for a rep to potentially do when they're looking at hundreds and hundreds of leads in their pipeline. This might be able to help them gauge where their efforts should be or what events should I invite this potential prospect out to. The last group here is kind of what I would consider next level type stuff. And some of these things are things that we haven't even fully integrated ourselves in. But the social media behavior is one area that, there's so much chatter about our team in that universe. Like, how do we get any of the good nuggets that we can actually have an action on? And here's an example of one that worked out for us. So using Fizzle, we were able to track when people tweet or post anything about our Jeremy Lin bobblehead night. So Pete Gwelly is actually our EVP here at the Hornets, and he retweeted back out to this guy to let him know that, yep, this Jeremy Lin bobblehead is going to happen, more details to come. And so using Fizzle, we were able to actually capture the person who tweeted this, Pinju Su, and we were able to see that in Twitter. Or excuse me, in Fizzle, not Twitter. So in Fizzle, we were able to capture this info, and then we were able to use our power of our data warehouse to match that person up to the contact in CRM. So again, you can kind of see it went from the social media world to Fizzle to Dynamics. And in this case here for this particular person, we were able, of course, to reach out to him because we knew he was interested in the Jeremy Lin bobblehead. We then sent him a message about, how to get that bobblehead, which was go to the game against the Houston Rockets. Lo and behold, he went to the game of the Houston Rockets by buying a ticket online. The next piece is food and beverage behavior. This is kind of the one that I think we're still working on here internally. But I think it's the big one to complete our customer lifetime value equation. So we have the ticketing data, obviously, in our data warehouse. We have the retail data in there flowing. The last piece, I think, is that food and beverage piece. So, we're kind of working with Levy and their E15 group right now to get that data in our data warehouse. And once we have it, we have a really good feeling at that point, like this is the true amount of money that this person is spending when they're in our arena. Last one here, mobile app behavior. We wanted to, take a look at, things that our fans are doing on their phones. Is that data that can get, pushed to our data warehouse? What would they use those things for? Maybe things like ticket scanning or in-seat ordering for food and beverage. Maybe they're, purchasing something online on their phone using our app. We're working with YinzCam right now to see if we can connect some of that behavior to the rest of the puzzle of that fan. So if we kind of pull all this together, and we actually looked at what this lead looks at now, this lead looks a whole heck of a lot different, right? He has a whole lot more info than just simply where he's at. We can look at, where his lead scores are, what his personas cluster is, what age is he, has he visited the website? When was the last time we called him? Did he tweet anything out on social media? When we called him last time, what was the last objection? All of these things are available for the reps to see in their CRM contact view when they're looking at a particular contact, and it's all data that our lead assigner, our CRM manager, can use to determine who she's going to send out as leads to the reps. So we've done plenty of campaigns on, sometimes it's just one piece of criteria, like a web visit, and sometimes they're combined. But it really allows us to really dig in and give the reps a much more educated phone call quickly when they're starting that call. So our challenge here for us at the Hornets, and this is kind of where we're going, is we've got to combine all of these things and figure out what is the super score. And what I mean by that is we have scoring for when we combine ticketing behavior and demographic data. But like, what happens if you buy a hoodie? Does that make you a 3-star? Does that bump you to a 4-star? Is it a 3.1 star? Like, does it have no effect at all? Those are the things that we need to find out. And that's what I've challenged our analytics team to be able to do, is come up with a super score that looks at all of these areas that we've looked at that can touch the Hornets brand, and figure out one super score that is kind of the end-all be-all for them in terms of will they buy tickets. Lastly, the very last thing we have here is picking the right people. So even if we have the super score on a person, and let's just come up with a number, we'll just say this lead is a 9. We still want to make sure that we're giving it to the best rep that we can. And so what we created was a little report card on each rep that basically goes over some of the stats like you would see on the player side. So instead of kind of shooting, rebounding, passing, dribbling, we have things like, how good are you at getting from voicemail to good conversation? How good are you at closing appointments? What percentage of your leads did you close that were B2Bs? These are all kind of our rep stats. And so we have them in a report card that we can give to the managers. And it's basically a synopsis of where they are, and gives them kind of a nice little spider graph here of where their strengths and weaknesses are, which can be helpful in determining what leads we give them. So if they're not necessarily great at closing single game buyers, but they're better at closing resale buyers, maybe we shift our strategies a little bit in terms of the volume of leads that we're giving them in each of those categories. So I'll let Russell go ahead and disseminate some questions out.
Thank you, Chris. That was awesome, and I can see why everyone at the MIT Sloan really enjoyed the workshop that you ran. We do have a couple of questions here, so I'm going to go through those. If there was something you were thinking about asking, now is your chance to get it into the queue. First up, how do you plan to connect F&B data back to the fan profile?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge there is getting something at the point of sale where the person can identify themselves. And that's a major challenge. That can be, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Cards, RFID chips. I'm a big believer in the mobile app is maybe the best avenue, if we can get a login on our mobile app. Because if you could get people to scan their mobile app to pay, kind of think of like the Starbucks route when you go there and you use the Starbucks app. That's data that now can be tied to the transaction and then sent to me in a feed. But we definitely have to work on the point of sale. I think that's the biggest stumbling block in that one.
Thank you, Chris. We got another question here. How are you going to not let the sales team be negatively affected by win expectancy, similar to what you were talking about when it comes to showing or not showing the rating score?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that my sales managers and I have been debating internally. Actually, I think it's a fair point to say, like, if I saw that the win expectancy was 2%, I'd be pretty bummed if I was a rep. And when we went through the model, it's not like we have these win expectancies that are really that high. I mean, they seem to all be in the single digits almost every time. So what we're contemplating doing is maybe doing either some sort of word conversion, like if it's above 2%, then we give it a word and we call it like good, or a thumbs up, or something of that nature. We've also talked about maybe only showing it when it's really, really negative, and then, or if it's really, really positive. So let's say you're under a 1% chance and you've called this lead 10 times, and basically our model is saying, like, we've never seen anybody close a lead with these stats of this opportunity. Like, maybe then that's where the message comes up that says, like, just cut bait. Our managers actually have found it, so we actually think the managers might adopt it more because it might be more helpful in their one-on-ones to see it, and it allows them to kind of talk to their reps and say, like, all right, we're going to cut these leads because your win expectancies are so low. We're just going to go ahead and cut these leads for the reps. We haven't really, made a final decision on that piece, but I think all of those are things that teams should talk about if they're going to go down this route.
No, that's a good point. Maybe your millennial scoring system may come in handy that you used during the presentation. Another great question here. So given your multiple scores and recency behaviors, as well as an understanding of the reps' strengths and weaknesses, how do you structure and distribute your campaigns, including starts and stops in CRM? How many campaigns do you have going at any given time for sales?
Gotcha. So I probably actually factor more on the number of total opportunities that they have. The managers and I are on the same page about trying to keep them somewhere around 400 to 500 opportunities at a given time. I think anything after 500 opportunities, we start to see the reps go a little bit haywire. They start forgetting leads, or they almost kind of get too discombobulated because there's too many leads that they have to get to. So I think we try to keep them under that particular number. The number of campaigns I don't think is as big of a deal because it's really just kind of how you're sorting the leads. So we'll have like what we call staple campaigns, like single game buyers or abandoners, cart abandoners, or web leads. Like those are ones that we're always going to be sprinkling a few of those in. So there might be 6 or 7 of those that are always on their pipeline. But then there's maybe 1 or 2 major campaigns that's like the major focus that we're going to do for the next couple weeks. So like our premium guys, yes, they have a few single game buyers and a few web leads and a few retail buyers maybe, but their major campaign is, the shock and awe campaign, where the majority of their leads would be in.
Got it. Makes sense. I've got 2 more, and I think we'll probably wrap it up there unless someone gets one more in here real quick. Simple one. Where did you get your DMA data for Charlotte to do your Personix indexing?
So we just picked up some research from Axiom directly. We were able to capture that info. So long ago since I remember actually grabbing it. We've been, it's been pretty much stagnant, for years. So I think I worked with a rep there who was able to help me with that. I kind of explained to them what I was trying to do. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think if you go to myaxiompartner.com, you can run a search on just simply your geographic city and just the cluster, and you can get those totals. I think they will display them. I don't know if anybody else in the audience maybe has tried that as well, but I'm pretty sure that that is also an option for you as well to get those city demographics.
Definitely worth giving that a shot. All right. One more came in here. As a team that is looking to implement lead scoring processes, how long did it take to convince ownership to make the investment in the software and for adoption across the organization?
I think to get the ROI, it should be almost immediate. I think when you originally start out, yeah, you are kind of sticking your neck out there. But if a lead scoring system works, like, you're immediately going to grab all the low-hanging fruit you didn't know. And you're certainly going to make that money back. I don't think there's any question about that. The adoption one's a little trickier because that involves, actual humans involved versus, lead scoring, which is just straight, algorithms and science. Like, you're eventually going to close those top scored leads, and you'll do it at a high clip. But the adoption one, you have personalities involved here. Your CRM person needs to be someone who is not only constantly training the reps, but also able to relate with them and buy in to what's going on. But that buy-in has to be all across the organization. For example, in my consulting times, I consulted with a team whose CRM person knew, was all in on lead scoring. They totally understood it. They, really utilized it and had it all ready to go, but their sales manager didn't believe in it at all. And so he kind of trumped the CRM manager and said, no, we're not doing any of your top score leads. We're doing this other campaign. And you can see there, it's not so much the adoption was low simply because of the personalities involved. So, I don't know if I have a great answer for saying how long it's going to take. If you have someone who is used to using lead scoring or has been another team that has seen it being successful, it could be very, very quick. But if you're at a team that has maybe never done it, it could be a year or two before, you really feel that you've got the adoption.
Great. And absolute last question. Why did you pick the specific Axiom attributes that you did to show the staff on the contact screen?
Yeah, I think the key thing that we were trying to do is, if I had to boil down, like, what is a sum of the states, like the thing that I'm going to be most worried about would be, like, what kind of money do they have? What kind of age, what age are they? What gender? Potentially, did they have discretionary income in their net worth? I mean, that seemed to be the items that the reps really focused on. So we actually pulled them, and that seemed to be what they wanted. And then again, if I just had to describe a sum of the states to you, those are like the 5 or 6 that I would use to describe a sum of the states to you. So we kind of stuck with those, and I think those are the easiest to digest. There wasn't a whole lot of, a rep can easily see the net worth and figure out what he wants to do from there. So, but I would leave it up to the reps. They also feel more engaged. I think that's a nice little point where you can say, how would you like your CRM demographics to look? And I think that worked out well for us.
No, that's a good way to get buy-in, make it feel like they have a hand in how the system's working when they can say, I want to see this and that, and you can give it to them. So that's a good point. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. We're going to call that a wrap for today. Thank you to all of our participants, especially those that took the time to ask questions there. Chris, really appreciate your time sharing this with us. Everyone, his contact information you can see up on the screen. Like I mentioned, we will put a recording of this, make available for a period of time afterwards. You can keep an eye out to your email for a link for that in the next day or so. Chris, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we'll hopefully look to do these core customer insights webinars probably once a month. So if you're a current customer and you'd like to participate in one, let us know. If not, we might be reaching out to you and volunteering you hopefully sometime soon. So take care, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.